Welcome to Books in Action. I'm Laura Humer. My guest tonight, Tricia Tunstall, has taught piano in Maplewood for years. She's also served as adjunct professor of music at Drew University and at Bergen College. She's currently pursuing a doctorate in music education at Boston University. Her fictions appeared in numerous publications, including the Kenyon Review and the Antioch Review. She's written lyrics for many different genres, including jazz and musical theater, and she performs frequently as an accompanist for solo artists and musical productions. And tonight, we're here to talk about Tricia's first book, Note by Note, published in April 2008 by Simon & Schuster. I'd like to start by quoting the starred review that Note by Note received in Publishers Weekly. They said, "For readers who possess the mildest interest in reading about music or how the mysterious process of learning to play a musical instrument is transferred from teacher to student, this well-composed narrative will be a joy to read. Those so inclined will undoubtedly revel in Tunstall's elegant prose based on her 15 years as a private music teacher. She offers graceful discussions of tonal music, how the pull of pop music has altered the musical environment, and why the astonishingly hearty phenomenon of the recital endures in our culture. This is a gem that deserves a wide audience." Well, that is really full of praise. So, Tricia, tonight I think we should start on the first half, maybe, by talking about the process of writing this book. So, let's start with the obvious question, which is, why did you do it?
Well, I have noticed for quite a while. I've been a teacher for quite a while, a music teacher for quite a while, and a writer for quite a while, but I never put those two tracks together. They were sort of parallel. I would write in the mornings and teach in the afternoons. But I've been noticing for a number of years that anytime I told people that I taught piano, they were immediately responsive, usually with a very vivid memory of their own piano teacher. And I was struck over and over again by what a strong memory and what a vivid memory and very specific memory that piano teacher, those piano lessons were, even though sometimes most of these people couldn't remember how to play anything, but they did remember the piano lesson and the piano teacher. And so I started to think about how interesting that is and wanted to explore what makes that such a memorable interaction and what's so vital and enduring about the piano lesson. And so I decided to put these two parallel tracks together and write about, in the morning, what I was doing in the afternoon.
Excellent.
And that's how the book was born.
And I have to ask you, were most people's memory of their piano teacher negative or not?
They're very mixed. They're
Really?
all over the map. I mean, I've taught people who remember their piano teachers as such beloved, formative, benign influences, and then I've talked to people who said, "Oh my God, she hit me over the knuckles with a ruler,
right.
and she ruined my love of music." So it really is. Memories really run the gamut.
And I think one of the things I really liked in your book during the section where the introduction, basically, where you're talking about why you did it and people's memory of their teachers. Wasn't it one of your sons who had some specific candy or something that
A juice box.
Oh, a juice box.
A juice box. One of my sons took piano lessons from a dear friend of mine in Maplewood, and remembers, while I remember the lovely recitals and the beautiful little pieces he played and how precocious he was, he remembers the little Sips juice boxes that were sitting on the counter that he couldn't have and that were spelled with 2 S's in the front. Remember those?
Yes, yes.
So that's his most vivid memory, although I'm sure he retains many other memories. But that sort of sensory thing is very strong.
Yes, I think you're right. So how long did it take from start to finish?
It took about 2.5 years to write. I wrote very slowly because I have a lot of other sort of balls in the air, and so I don't have a lot of time to write. And it was a complete pleasure to write throughout because I was writing about something that I really love and love to explore, and was also I was also actively teaching during that time. So it was a wonderfully fertile thing to be writing about what I was thinking about and doing at the same time.
I bet. So no problem with writer's block.
I really, not this time around. Not
Excellent,
quite.
excellent. So was it important to stay disciplined during this process, or was it just so natural that you didn't even have to think
No,
about it?
discipline was certainly involved because, one's life can just take over, and there are constant interruptions and demands on one's time. And so I did have to make sure that I set aside specific times. But it was always those times I really looked forward to.
So while you were doing this, the things that you were juggling were lessons.
Lots of piano lessons. I teach about 40 students, and I was also teaching almost the entire time I was teaching music appreciation and music history at either Bergen College or Drew University. And I also decided at right about the same time I started to write the book, I decided to get my doctorate in music education. So I've been doing that online at Boston University. And then there's 2 sons and the household and all of those things were a
Wow,
lot
so
to
it's
juggle.
amazing that you found time to do this. Like, how much time would you say that you spend on average in a day working on the book during those 2.5 years?
I didn't write every day. I would write a few hours a week. There were times when it was
You just find
a
block.
lot of hours a week, and there were times when it was just a couple, and there were weeks that went by that I couldn't find the time. But it evolved really naturally and tremendously pleasurably. And I had a wonderful agent also who was really part of the writing process. Very important part of the beginning of the writing process, because when I began the book about 2.5 years ago, I didn't really know whether, I knew that this subject interested me a great deal, but I didn't really know whether I could shape it into a book. And I had a friend who was a nonfiction literary agent that I had known for many years. I wrote 2 pages, and I sent him the 2 pages and said, "What do you think?" And he immediately responded and said, "I think this is a book. I think you're going to write this book. I'm going to help you write it, and I'm going to sell this book." And God bless him, it came to pass.
Wow, that
It
is
was
really
very, very supportive, helpful, and really pivotal all the way through.
So this sounds like the experience of writing this book has been really different than other writing experiences that you've had in your life.
Yes, I've had so many other kinds of writing experiences. I've written a lot of short fiction, although that was really more in the 80s and early 90s. And that's a very speculative experience, because then you don't have anybody cheering you on. You don't have an agent in the background saying, "Yes, that's a great short story." You just spin it out on faith and then send it out and hope somebody likes it. At the other end of the spectrum, I've done writing, corporate writing, speech writing, those things, and that's very different because you're writing to a timetable, you're writing to a deadline, you're writing to a very specific task.
Right.
That's its own thing. And I've also written a lot of lyrics, which is fun in a different way because that's collaborative. Then you're working with a composer. And then it's
And do you have a favorite type of writing?
no, I really love all those kinds of writing. I think my favorite experience probably of all has been writing this book.
Yeah.
It's certainly the most recent and the freshest.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So would you advise, aspiring writers to try to write something that is very closely tied to their lives?
I think I have really discovered the truth in that old adage about writing about what you know, because no matter what your power of imagination is, and it can be great, and no matter what your creative, expressive powers are, and they can be great, there's such a resonance to writing about what you know. And you certainly don't have to stop there. You can use that as a starting point and then branch out and write about all sorts of things that you can imagine. But I find that when you write about what you know, you can really go deep. You can go deep, you can go specific, and then you can go wide after that. And so I would certainly give that advice.
But now, how about the possible discomfort with the idea of publishing truths about yourself and your family and your students? I mean, was there any of that, or is it, the book is presents a very positive picture, really,
Right.
of everybody in it, basically. So I guess that would lessen
I
it.
was
But
really aware of writing about students, many of whom I'm still teaching, all of whom are still, in the community and connected to me. One thing I did was to change all of their names, so that I wanted to protect their privacy. I also was extremely careful I was also extremely aware that once the book got published, these things that I was writing about them would be in print forever. That's a kind of permanence. So I was very careful to say things that if they carried them with them for the rest of their lives, that would feel okay, that would feel good, and not anything that would feel troublesome. So that was certainly a concern. And then as for the rest of my family, my two sons in particular, I did, because I do speak about both of them and more in the last chapter, which is more of a memoir than the rest of the book. I certainly did run the manuscript by both of them, and my older one said, "It's great, it's fine, no problem," and my younger one said, "It's great, it's fine, but I think I should be in it a little more."
That's excellent.
Right.
And how about your students? Have they given you any feedback on how you portrayed them?
They have. Most of them haven't read it yet.
Okay.
One of them in particular, who you know fairly well, he's related to you, decided that I hadn't used the right name for him. He would like to choose a different stage name. So in the sequel, I will certainly change his stage name accordingly. But as far as what I have written about them, I haven't had much feedback, and certainly when I have had feedback, it's been delight and pleasure.
How about that one, I heard you say at one of your events for the book, a fun story about one of your students who was not receptive to certain kinds of music and
right,
had a strong
she was
reaction.
very difficult to persuade to play numbers of different kinds of music, and when it came to her stage name, she also objected to that. Wasn't too happy with that, so she made her peace with it, I think.
Okay, that's good.
Right.
So, the last chapter, which is probably my favorite chapter of the book, is the most autobiographical. And, was that more difficult for you to write, or did you spend a lot more time on that, or?
That was the easiest to write.
Really?
It was a story that was, that I think I felt very relieved in the telling. It was the story of my last piano teacher, who was also my husband. And I met him, Donald Johnston, I met him when I went to him for lessons right out of college. And he was my last piano teacher and had a tremendous effect on my teaching. I don't think I would have become a teacher had it not been for him. And we had a very rich and complicated marriage and life in and about music, among other things. And so he died 6 years ago, and in the process of mourning him, part of what I've mourned is the loss of the musical connection that we had. So it was very comforting in a way to write the chapter.
Wow, okay. And did you, it was an interesting choice that you made to put that at the end. I really liked it at the end, but it is about events that, many of which occur before you start giving piano lessons. Was there any thought to putting it at the beginning versus the end, or it was just a natural wrapping up?
No, actually, it felt like a natural wrapping up. I did think about whether it was the tone of the chapter was so different from the rest that maybe it wasn't appropriate. Maybe it didn't fit with the rest of the book, but my agent was very supportive in that. He helped me sort of shape it so that it did fit, and it was the natural. It felt like the natural end.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a short break, and afterwards we'll talk more about the editing and publishing process.
Great.
Faster than searching the World Wide Web. More inspiring than a half-cap mocha latte. Able to answer any question with insight and detail. This superhero of knowledge can find the answer to any question no matter what the problem. And she works in your neighborhood at your public library. When you need to know, get to know your library. Log on to njlibraries.org.
Welcome back to Books in Action. I'm Laura Humer, and I'm talking to Tricia Tunstall, who has published her first book, Note by Note, about her years teaching piano in Maplewood. We're going to move on now, Tricia, to talk about what it was like to be published for the first time. I'm sure there are a lot of listeners who'd be interested.
The process of publishing a book is really fascinating, and I'm thrilled and feel blessed that I was able to experience it, because it's something I've always wanted to do. There were some surprises along the way. First of all, my agent that I was telling you about was able to sell the book to Simon & Schuster, which was a wonderful thing. And I had a very supportive and congenial editor there, who also supported me at every step of the way and was receptive and helpful and made good suggestions. So all of that went very, very smoothly. And I would say maybe the first surprise came when I got the copy edited version. And that was about, I guess, 8 months ago. They sent me the version. I completed the manuscript in August, and then they gave it to their in-house copy editor, and he did what's called copy editing, which has to do with a lot of punctuation and spelling and all of that stuff. Sent it to me, and I read the first chapter and was horrified that they moved commas, put them in, took them out, took out dashes, all these little tiny punctuational things that may seem like details,
right.
but they really define my style. They define the rhythm of my sentences. And so his purple comments were all over the place, or his were green, actually. They sent me a little envelope with a purple pencil in it. That was my weapon of choice. And they said, you make your comments in purple. And so I went through the first chapter just, changing everything back. With the purple, put it back, take it out, put it back. And it was interesting to find that by the time I reached the 4th chapter, the copy editor had made almost no corrections. And in the last half of the book, there were almost no changes of punctuation or anything like that. So I think what happened is that he got used to my rhythm. He figured out what the rhythm of my sentences was and what my style was. And so he sort of accepted my punctuational idiosyncrasies, whereas in the beginning he wanted to put them all sort of in some sort of way that seemed standard to him. So we worked it out. It worked out just fine. They accepted my version, and most of my commas, appear intact in the book.
I'm so relieved.
Dashes. So that was an interesting part of the process. The next interesting part was about the title and the cover. Come to find out that authors don't really get to choose their titles or their covers.
Wow.
And so they had some ideas for titles that I didn't like. I had some ideas for titles that they didn't like. We went back and forth quite a bit about the title of the book. I was very surprised that would happen. We arrived at a title that I'm happy with.
What was your favorite? What would
My
you have
favorite
preferred?
title was, ideally I would have called it Music to My Ears. Mm-hmm. It's a more romantic title, and it doesn't describe exactly what the book is about, which was their objection to it. They said, if you call it Music to My Ears, they're not going to know what it's about. I kind of liked the mystery aspect of that. But they know, but they're the publishers. They've been in business a long time, and they know their business. So yeah. I was happy to make that, make that compromise. The cover of the book I also had my own ideas about, and in fact there's a wonderful artist and children's book author in town, good friend of mine named Irene Kelly. She writes beautiful children's books and illustrates them, and I had asked her whether she would maybe do an illustration that might be right for the cover of the book. So she read the manuscript at an early stage, created a beautiful sketch of a grand piano that's very buoyant and lively and seems to almost breathe. And I thought that was a great cover for the book. Sent that to Simon & Schuster, and they decided that they weren't going to use it for the cover, but they did use it as the art at the beginning of every chapter. So that did find its way into the book.
Oh, it is lovely.
Yeah. So, all of those things about putting a book together are things that I didn't know before, and it was fascinating to learn them.
So in the end, did they create the cover without your input at all?
No, I did have some input.
Okay.
I'm I'm still not sure whether the arrangement of the teacher and the student hands on this keyboard are exactly anything that I've really experienced in a lesson. But, I've that sort of artistic liberty, I guess, and I'm certainly content with. I think it has a lot of beautiful aspects to it.
Yeah, I think it does make its point.
It
definitely.
does. Yes, it does.
So overall, do you feel, it doesn't sound like you feel bitter or powerless the way I've heard authors talk about their experience with
No,
publishers.
I really felt that I had a wonderfully collaborative relationship with my editor and my publicist, and that they were really going to bat for me in the ways that they could, and so I felt very blessed with that in that whole process.
Well, speaking of going to bat, actually, I was going to ask you, how much support have they given you since the book has come out? You know, are you pleased with the publicity that they've drummed up,
Yes,
etc.?
I have. Yes, they have a publicist working for me. He has sent the press package out to a lot of places. They have gotten me some very nice reviews, most particularly in People magazine.
Congratulations.
The April 28th issue, which was a lovely and unexpected surprise. I've done some book signings and some appearances here and there. And in general, I think they're working to do everything they can. Their idea is to try to position the book as a great gift for either Mother's Day, which is coming right up, or as a graduation present, or as a present during recital time for one's music teacher. And that's something that they're that's the angle that they're kind of trying to push, which I think makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you feel very positive about your experience with the publisher. How much of that do you think has to do with your own expectations? Perhaps you were very realistic going into it and did not have high expectations, or what do you think?
Yes, I would say. I think that a first-time unknown author who goes into this thinking that her book is going to end up in big stacks on the front table of Barnes & Noble is going to be disappointed.
Yes.
But I did not have that expectation.
Or at Goldfinch Books.
At Goldfinch Books, well, I certainly do expect it to be on our front table. But no, you really do need to be realistic about how that business works. It's a tough business, and it's getting tougher all the time. So any support that a publisher can give you is welcome.
And so what has been the publisher's reaction to your excellent review in Publishers Weekly and your review in People magazine? Are they excited about it?
They're very excited about it, and they're trying to make those sort of they're trying to use those as they go out and approach more media, more print media, and more radio possibilities. So they're certainly delighted that those reviews came in. And
Have you been on the radio?
I have been on the radio. I was interviewed by WQXR, and that will actually air on Saturday, May 3rd, that interview in the morning. And then I was interviewed by an affiliate station of National Public Radio, NPR.
Oh, yeah,
There you go.
NYC.
Yes, and well, it's NYC here, but
Right.
NPR all over the country,
Yes.
and I was interviewed by a Chicago affiliate of that station, which was fun because that was a call-in show. And so I was getting calls and questions from piano teachers, piano students, grandfathers with promising young people in the Midwest. So that was very much fun, a little sort of window into the musical life of the Midwest. that I would
Absolutely.
never
Like
have
what
had
kind of
contact
question did they ask you?
Oh, I had a grandfather call in and say, my young granddaughter is so precocious. She's only 5, or should I start her now? Should I buy her a keyboard? Should I buy her a piano? Lovely questions. And then I had a piano teacher call in with some interesting questions about how I taught certain things. And then I had several people call in, this is the theme that we started with, saying, I want to tell you how I remember my piano teacher.
Wow.
That same theme again.
Wow. That's very
So-
interesting. It is a very strong image,
It is.
definitely.
Yeah.
So did you study writing in college? Is that what you
I didn't.
Majored in?
No, I majored in philosophy.
Oh, same
Nice,
difference,
useful
right?
subject. But I did take writing courses pretty extensively after that. I studied writing at the New School, and I went to a number of writing seminars, and I always wrote.
Yeah, that's great. And while you were writing the book, did you talk to your students about what you were thinking of including about them?
No,
or-
they didn't know.
They didn't.
They didn't know. They
Wow.
were surprised.
Wow.
I didn't talk to much of anybody while I was writing the book. I tend to do better that way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Do you have any tricks actually about how you were able to squeeze this into your life? Like, did you sequester yourself or
Yeah, it was a very, it had a very private beginning. I talked to my agent, I got an agent, and just basically spent time, it was just me, my thoughts, my writing process, and the agent for a long time until I didn't tell anybody that I was writing it until I really knew that it was a real thing. There's a little bit of superstition there, I guess.
Sure, sure. And how about working with your editor? Was there a lot of back and forth?
Relatively little, and I'm sure that that varies with writers and editors depending on their temperament and what they're aiming for and whether they're really lined up with the same vision of the book. My editor, I think, really agreed with my vision of the book from the very beginning. Didn't want to shift it around very much or change it. And
Except for the title and the cover.
but during the writing process.
Right, no, yeah.
And so since we were so aligned with a really common vision of the book, there wasn't a great deal of controversy or change that happened, that, any sort of struggle that happened. And I'm sure that varies, depending on the writer, depending on the editor. And who knows what may happen my next time out.
Exactly, exactly. Well, so what is your hope for what different readers might take from this book? I mean, clearly it has a different meaning if it's being read by a piano teacher.
Right.
Different meaning for a student.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I can tell you, I'm going to start with something really touching that happened 2 nights ago. A student of mine came who has read the book or is in the middle of reading the book. She walked in the door and she said, I composed something. I made up a composition. And I said, Lena, I said, you haven't done that for a long time. I haven't heard you compose something of your own. She said, no, but I was really inspired by your book to compose. Oh. There's nothing that could be more satisfying than that. My students inspired me to write the book. If my writing the book can inspire them back, that's such a perfect circle that there's nothing more satisfying. Other people, I would hope that this book would touch people who are teachers of all subjects, people who are interested in music in any way. I'm thrilled that my young students are reading it and getting something out of it. I would hope that it reaches a fairly wide audience and that people find different kinds of things to take away from it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one of the really excellent messages that it carries is the whole concept of being open to what the kids are saying about what they enjoy. And that seems to be really an integral part of how you teach piano, is to be open to what they...
It definitely is, and that's going to be something that's going to be interesting to other teachers of music and other subjects. Some may disagree with it, which would be really interesting. I'd love this to start dialogue among teachers as to how much do you start where the child is and how much do you try to bring the child to where you are. So it's a very fertile thing to... Is
that a philosophy that you really have developed personally from your life experiences, or is this something that is driven by listening to other teachers saying this is the way it should be done?
No, I don't. I have not gotten that from other teachers really much. Although, and my teachers, when I was growing up, while they were wonderfully responsive to me, didn't make much of an effort to find out where I was and where I was starting. That was fine too. But I have just found, this is just a way it has evolved that works for me. I have found that I can go farthest with kids if I know where they're starting.
Well, and I think it's clear from your writing that it's a fulfilling way to teach and, in fact, to live.
It's a fulfilling way to be in a relationship.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, and I look forward to your next book.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
On that note by note, thank you for joining us for Books in Action.